No, not in the short term. And I'm going to explain this to you in 3 simple, fast steps. Step number 1, let's go over the new hashtag, and that is feel the buzz. And what I'm talking about, you go back to Bernie Sanders' campaign, feel the burn. What the Fed is doing now, and the government, not to be outmatched, has come out with a $2 trillion stimulus package. They are all feeling the buzz. And who is Buzz? None other, of course, than Buzz Lightyear. They are taking everything to infinity and beyond. Let's start with a chart of the cerveza sickness in the United States. Editor, throw up the chart. The reason I want to point this out is because we've all heard about exponential growth, and that is the problem with this cerveza sickness. But now let's look at a chart of the Fed's balance sheet. On the left, we go from 3.7 trillion all the way up to 4.7 trillion. This is starting on January of 2018, going to today's date. You could see we were in quantitative tightening. The Fed was reducing the size of its balance sheet until we got to the repo blow up September 17th. Fed starts increasing their balance sheet, buying $60 billion a month worth of T-bills. And if you were watching my last video, or if you're not living under a rock, you know that they have now come out with $700 billion of QE and $125 billion a day. And I think that's in addition to the $700 billion they were already doing. So the Fed is definitely feeling the buzz. And you can see that with the exponential growth of their balance sheet. The exact same type of curve you see in the cases of cerveza sickness in the United States. It's exponential growth. And every single day, the Fed is coming up with more of these alphabet soup type solutions to bluntly throw at the problem and hope something sticks. Remember Monday's video? If you didn't watch that, we went over the first 3, and since then they've grown in size. They're feeling the buzz because these 4-letter alphabet soup programs are going to infinity and beyond. So much so that they're not even doing 4-letter programs anymore. They've expanded them to 5-letter programs. So on Monday's video, we talked about the PDCF, Primary Dealer Credit Facility. And we went over everybody's favorite program, and that, of course, is MILF. Only the Fed could be dense enough to name a program MILF, that's for sure. We also went over the CPFF, which is Commercial Paper Funding Facility. And now, of course, there is more. We've got ESF, PMCCF, SMCCF, and TALF. I'm not sure if that has anything to do with ALF, but let's go straight to the Fed's website and check it out. Let's start with the Primary Market Corporate Credit Facility, or PMCCF. Simply put, this is the Fed printing up funny money, lending it directly to the corporations instead of having to go through the primary dealers. The Secondary Market Corporate Credit Facility, or SMCCF, is the Fed taking the funny money, going directly into the corporate bond market and buying existing debt. Again, not having to go through the primary dealers. They're doing this to keep interest rates low. Next, Term Asset Backed Securities Loan Facility, or TALF. The TALF program will enable the issuance of asset-backed securities, or ABS. These are securities backed by student loans, auto loans, credit card debt, and SBA loans. On Monday's video, I said the Fed was going directly into the market and buying these assets, which They are. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. But they're tap dancing around a little bit and saying, well, we're not buying them directly. What we're doing is providing financing to investors to buy the garbage debt. And, oh, by the way, ignore the fine print because they're non-recourse loans, of course. So basically the Fed's printing the funny money and just gifting it to these investors in hopes that they go and buy the garbage debt. And why wouldn't you with a non-recourse loan? This is important because no banks would issue the debt in the first place if they had to keep the paper or the loan on their books. They're not going to find a subprime borrower and say, hey, here's 50 grand for the next 10 years at 0% interest rate so you can go out and buy a brand new Ford pickup truck that depreciates by 60% the second you drive it off the lot. The borrower is going to default on that 100% guaranteed. So before the ink is dry, the bank will sell the debt to Wall Street. Wall Street bundles up all the toxic garbage, just like mortgage-backed securities, and pawns them off on any sucker they can find. Who's the sucker? Usually it's the pension funds. If they can't find a sucker, that means no more student loans, no more auto loans, no more credit cards, no more SBA loans, and you'd see what that would do to the economy. This is why the Fed needs to find a sucker and give them free, non-recourse money to make sure the credit is continually flowing and the debt is always growing. Remember, what is the economy built on? Asset prices, debt, and confidence. Moving on to everybody's favorite four-letter solution, and that is MILF. We talked about MILF on Monday. Siri told us exactly how it works.
Mom, I'd like to
But they've added something to it called Verdens. I have no idea why they have an S on the end and why they don't with all the other abbreviations, but VRDN. So that stands for Variable Rate Demand Notes. Okay. The change is they're expanding, shocker, what they're buying to, it looks like muni bonds and bank CDs. They've also made changes to the CPFF, which is the Commercial Paper Funding Facility. We discussed that Monday as well. And the changes they've made are they are now including high quality, tax-exempt commercial paper as eligible securities, and they're lowering the overall interest rates they're charging the corporations to borrow the funny money. And I want to point out in the fine print, if you look at the PMCCF, which is the Fed just lending money directly to corporations, they consider this a bridge loan for 4 years. 4 years. I thought the cerveza sickness was only supposed to last a couple months. In addition to that, the borrowers may elect to defer interest and principal payments during the first 6 months of the loan, extendable at the discretion of the Federal Reserve. Listen to what they're saying. They're admitting that they're just giving this money to corporations. This is 100% a bailout. The Fed is definitely feeling the buzz with all these crazy programs they're inventing almost on a daily basis. What it's about is propping up the credit markets, making sure that no one goes out of business because they can just borrow as much funny money as they want. And it's about taking the assets off the balance sheet of the private sector, moving them onto the balance sheet of the Fed so nobody has to take a haircut. It's obvious this is what they're doing. And it's also obvious their balance sheet is going to infinity and beyond. And the government doesn't want to be outdone by any means. They came out with their own $2 trillion stimulus package. So insolvent Sam, who could be your drunk uncle, of course, is going to make it rain on the entire economy. What's bizarre to me is the Fed is stepping in and bailing out everybody, but yet the government is bailing out everyone as well. So what is the second bailout for? It seems like it's just charity at the expense of the taxpayer, meaning it's corporate charity. They're just giving them all this money, giving them profits at the expense of our futures, our children's futures, and our grandchildren's futures in the form of running up all the deficits that will be required to pay this debt and even the interest on the debt. So if you're one of those people that say, oh, the debt doesn't matter, we can service it. Yeah, but if the debt goes to 40, 50, $100 trillion, think about what the interest is going to be. Then also think about how the Fed's going to have to monetize that and how much purchasing power your dollars, your kids' dollars, your grandkids' dollars will lose on a moving forward basis. But there's a couple points to the $2 trillion stimulus package I wanted to make very clear. First, $1,200 going to most single individuals. Not a one-time payment, but for 4 months. 4 months. Who on earth at the end of the 4 months is going to want to give up the $1,200? Nobody. So this temporary program, like all temporary government programs, is going to become permanent. This is the start of the MMT and the helicopter money we have all been talking about for months. Also, there's language that limits the future buybacks for corporate America, at least the people that are taking these bailouts, which at the end of the day will most likely be everyone on the S&P 500. Even the subway down the street is going to be getting a bailout. But you notice they're saying no mas to the bailouts, or at least they're limiting them extensively. And I've been talking about this on Twitter for the last couple weeks. You may say, George, well, that's fantastic news. I don't want any more corporate buybacks. I'm not saying that's good or bad. What I am saying is look at the flip side of the coin. If there are no corporate buybacks, there's a very low probability that the market recovers. Why? Because corporate buybacks have been the majority of the increase in the S&P for the last 10 years. So if your friend and family member Fred has a 401k, or maybe you do, and you've taken a 50% hit over the last 30 days, your purchasing power has been cut in half. And if the market doesn't recover, that means your purchasing power won't recover either. And for a lot of these baby boomers that are retiring, that means their purchasing power just went down by 50% for the rest of their lives. Step number 2. Now let's dive into why the dollar might not be doomed, at least in the short term, according to Brent Johnson, author of the dollar milkshake theory. It all starts with understanding how money is created. More on that in just a moment. Let's look at a chart of the DXY going back to May all the way to today. Starts at 98, stays pretty consistent, up and down a little bit until we get to the beginning of the year. It shoots up to 100, then plummets all the way down below 96, then shoots up to over 102, and then it's pulled back just slightly. In fact, editor, throw up a chart of the Fed's balance sheet, and you'll see when it goes parabolic, it's almost the exact same time when the dollar goes through the roof. The exact opposite of what you would expect to happen. To understand this further and what cross currents could be at play, let's go straight to a clip of my full-length interview with the man himself, Brent Johnson.
Money is created in two ways. You can print it physically, and you add to the stock of the monetary base, which then frees up the ability to loan more. So you can either print it or you can loan it. Those are the two methods via which money gets created. When you reach the end of the loaning, when you get a credit contraction, That's the opposite of money being created. It's being destroyed. Okay? So when it's no longer the loans are no longer being rolled over, money's no longer being created through expansion.
Right.
The only way to get new money into the system to plug the hole is the Fed to come in. Boom. Swap lines, printing money, QE, whatever it is. That's the way they plug the hole. But my point is, I don't care if they buy $1 trillion a day. The hole's too big. You can't keep up with it.
To really get our minds around what Brent is saying, let's go straight to the Bank of England report from 2014 titled Money Creation in the Modern Economy. The first diagram we come to illustrates Brent's point very well. We have 3 balance sheets: the central bank, commercial banks, and consumers. On the left-hand side, prior to the loan being created. On the right-hand side is after the loan is created. I want you to notice the red box on the left-hand side in the middle, the deposits that are liabilities for the commercial banks. That's the money supply right there. So when a consumer goes to a commercial bank and says, hey, I need a home loan, they say, no problem. We're going to create more deposits for you to buy that house. And on the asset side of our balance sheet is going to be the new loan. Let's say the new loan is for $1,000, and prior to the new loan being created, there was $500 in the system. So now after the loan, there's $1,500 worth of money supply. Well, if the consumer immediately paid off the loan, we'd go from $1,500 of money supply right back to where we started with $500. Plus, they're going to pay interest. This is where it gets interesting. So if the original loan amount was $1,000, let's say they pay additional $1,000 in interest over the lifespan of the loan. Well, in order to pay back the loan plus interest, they'd need $2,000. But remember, there's only $1,500 in the entire system. There's not enough dollars for them to pay back the loan with interest unless there's more debt created in the interim, increasing the amount of dollars so the consumer has the dollars to not only pay back the principal, but the interest. This is what Brent is talking about when he says that you first need to understand how money is created and destroyed if you want to understand why the dollar is going up and why it most likely won't collapse in the short term. Step number 3, current dollar dynamics. We get how money's created and how it's destroyed. We also get the fact there's fewer amount of dollars compared to the amount of debt and interest in the system. But let's take a deeper dive into why Brent Johnson thinks the dollar is not doomed short term, and he thinks it's going to infinity and beyond. And to be clear, although we have, let's say, $20 of debt and interest in the system, we can pay it back with only $10 of money supply. Just because there is more debt and interest in the system compared to the money supply doesn't mean that we can't pay it off as long as the velocity stays high. What is velocity? That's the rate at which the currency circulates within the local economy. How fast does it go from entity A, B, to C? And to Brent Johnson's point, because of the cerveza sickness, we could see velocity in the United States and around the world come to a screeching halt. To make matters worse, we could see the additional loans, the new loans, in other words, the new money supply, also come to a stop. Why is this? Because your friend and family member Fred won't leave the house. He's scared to do anything except sit on the couch and watch Netflix. So he's not taking on any additional debt. No more loans, means no more money supply, while at the same time he's still paying down his existing debt and he's not spending much money in the economy, therefore bringing that velocity down. So let's look at some real numbers here. If the United States has $2,000 worth of debt, $1,000 worth of money supply, kind of a 2-to-1 ratio, and your friend and family member Fred pays off $999, that takes the money supply down to $1, but we still have $1,001 worth of demand. The demand skyrockets, so the value of the dollar skyrockets relative to the stuff in the local economy, goods and services, and the currencies outside of the United States. The Fed comes in and tries to plug the hole by creating additional money supply through lending and printing more funny money. So they try to create the $999 that was lost by your friend and family member Fred paying down his principal. The problem the Fed had before is they had to go through the primary dealers. So if the primary dealers weren't playing ball, the $999 would never get into the system. But now, with the new alphabet soup, this circumnavigates the primary dealers so the Fed can create deposits. This could give them the ability, or a much better ability, to create the $999 they need to fill the gap. Who knows what will happen? Brent Johnson's opinion is the Fed isn't going to be able to create money supply faster than the destruction of the money supply by the individuals in the local economy and the whole United States going into a recession or depression. Again, remember, that's lower velocity, no more loans, no more money supply, while at the same time you're destroying existing money supply by paying off current debts. He gives a great analogy using musical chairs and the national debt of the United States. We've got $23 trillion in debt, and each one of these little people, if you want to call them that, they represent $1 trillion. I think I've got 23 up there. Close enough. And we have $4 trillion of base money at the Fed. That's actually kind of the real money that you have to pay back all the debt. So let's call it 23 trillion. Well, it's this game of musical chairs, which is velocity. As long as the music is playing and all these people are walking around, no big deal. But as soon as the velocity stops, as soon as the additional money supply stops, everyone scrambles for a seat. Well, there's 23 people and only 4 chairs. So I asked Brent specifically, I said, does the Fed have the ability to create another 23 chairs or another 46 chairs, whatever it is they want? And he says, yes, they absolutely have the ability, but it boils down to political capital. He doesn't think that when you look at the politics involved regarding the psychology, the game theory, everything that goes into making those decisions, that they're going to have the ability to, again, create enough money to counterbalance all the money that's being destroyed in and outside of the United States. And I know that sounds crazy when we talk about the Fed taking their balance sheet to infinity and beyond, but this is really what it boils down to. And I want to point out the fact that the difference between a Peter Schiff, Brent Johnson, or a Luke Gromen or Jim Records, any of those guys, isn't really how they analyze the system. They all would totally agree on how money is created, how it gets into the real economy, and how it's destroyed by your friend and family member Fred. What they disagree on is the distribution mechanism and the psychology that's involved with the participants who are in control. That's really what it boils down to. So if you get Brent and Luke talking side by side, they're going to agree on 99% of what they say. It's just the 1% unknown that they disagree on. So hopefully you now have a better understanding of Brent Johnson's dollar milkshake theory. To be clear, that's not all of it, but we outlined some of the details and got into the nuance. If you'd like me to go into how Luke Gromen sees things differently on Friday's video, let me know in the comments below. For more content that'll help you build wealth and thrive in a world of out-of-control central banks and big governments, check out this playlist right here. And I will see you on the next video.